Hewitt, and I have the privilege of being married to the worship director, Kim. So if you see me winking at her sometimes, it's just not somebody that attends here. It really is legit. I did put a ring on it, by the way. But I am so glad that you are here today. It's just amazing the things that God is doing. We are in week 3 of our Joyful, F-U-L-L, Christmas series. And 2 weeks ago, we kicked things off in an amazing way as we talked about discovering our joy, or rediscovering joy. And that's important because this is a season where we want to be joyful, but the truth is sometimes we just find ourselves in a time of pain, a time of challenge or difficulty. Relationships can kind of go crazy. The bills, like, man, am I even going to be able to make payments this month? And so how do you find joy in that? And I would encourage you to kind of go back and listen if you missed that. And then last week, as we're looking at this joyful series, it was literally mind-blowing. Mind-blowing. Now, you're like, a mind-blowing service, what does all that mean? Well, we were talking about finding our joy in music. Matter of fact, I think my Facebook post this past week read something like, what does Braveheart, a whale, Jehoshaphat, and neuroplasticity all have to do with finding joy? Well, it was all about music, and it was an incredible time where I think we all learned something last week, and it was just powerful as we discovered joy in music. Now, before I kind of continue really with today's message, I just want to say, I got to tell you, as Muncie's newest church, and having the privilege to pastor the newest church in town, I love who we are becoming. I love this church. I truly do. I love what we are doing. I love the prayers that we are praying. And most importantly, I love what God is doing and how He is blessing. November 18th, I believe, is a date we stuck a stake in the ground in this church where we really, truly became a praying church. And seeing already some of the prayers that are being answered, some of the prayers that He has given us to pray, it has just been awesome. And I was thinking before kind of this message, I just, we're not even 3 months old yet, but I just wanted to give God some praise here, some shout-outs. And I threw up some pictures here on the screen. You can kind of see that. Just consider some of the things that we've done recently. Here's a picture that we did for all of our college students. There's a couple in the front rows here. Normally we've got like 20, 30 of them sitting in here. But when the exams got done, they ran like Forrest Gump to get home. Like they were ready to get home. And to be able to host a pre-exam dinner for them was just awesome. To let them know, hey, we love you and we're supporting. And what was great about that, it wasn't just something we bought pizza for and said, hey, come in and eat. But there was, I think, 5 different families, 5 different moms out there that said, hey, you know what, I can do this. I can make something. It was a total team effort. And that was a win for our church. And I just love that. And then that Saturday before, are we getting these pictures up here? Maybe we're not. I didn't see the last one. I don't know, maybe Kim, you can go back there and figure that out. We can clip through these, flip them real quick. But my son last week, Mrs. Camp did this whole Christmas musical of Buddy the Elf. You've seen Buddy, kind of one of the favorite Christmas movies. And my son had an opportunity to play Buddy. And the college students just showed up for that. They spent money to get in, and they made the 25-minute drive there. And I walked away from that thinking, man, this is church right here on a Saturday night, at Delta High School. And that was really awesome. And then, of course, we're a little bit crazy, Kim and I are. We invited the whole church out for a Christmas party, had a fun time with the White Elephant Gift and doing that. And then there was about 20 of us that chipped in to make Secret Families happen. Many of you were a part of that. That's kind of this kind of once-a-year thing that Muncie does where we just bless families in great need with Christmas gifts. And I think over 2,000 families were served that day, and that was really cool. And then for Thanksgiving, we gave away 4 different turkeys. We bought 4 different turkeys and just kind of took money out of the offering that we had, and we just said, hey, we want to bless you, give you a good meal. And that was, and working with Muncie Mission to do that was great. And then, of course, having a chance to partner with local businesses. And I mean, the list just goes on. We had a shootout, because every new church has to have a shootout. If you missed the shootout, I'm telling you, you missed a whole bunch of fun as we just kind of shot things with bows and arrows and BB guns and and did some skeet shoot, and that was just a great, great day. But even looking ahead, I want to remind you, don't forget, after the new year, be saving your stuff because we're going to have a free sale. And we want to, again, bless the community with just some of the things, you know, the good used stuff, not the stuff that's junk. But we really want to bless the community. We did this kind of last year, and it was amazing how we were just able to bless others and just build relationships and make an impact in the community. And I always tell people, listen, church, it's not about us, but it's about making the impact for those that don't have a relationship with God yet. And of course, as we do that, we have the privilege of receiving those blessings as we're using our gifts and serving others. And so that's really, really awesome. But today, this is what I'm really super excited about. I need your help today after this service. Brent, raise your hand. Everybody turn around, look at Brent back there. Okay, my preaching is going to get really tested today because he's only had 2 hours of sleep. But let me tell you what Brent did. All right, God provided him a truck, and that's another story. But this past summer, one of the things that God did is I got cold call from a pastor in Pennsylvania. He says, hey, we've got 72 people. We can come. We want to serve you. We heard you're a new church. Could you use us? I said, yes, absolutely. So we started working on our church campus. And one of the leaders there said, hey, what is your plan for the floors? I said, man, I don't even know yet, but we know that we need new floors here. He says, well, I work for a flooring company. The owner's a Christian. I want to have a conversation with him. Could you use some flooring? I said, absolutely. Well, guess what? Brent, 8 hours away in Pennsylvania, had his truck, and he picked up all of the flooring that we were going to have for the church yesterday from Pennsylvania. It's in the parking lot right now, but here's the deal. Some of it got a little wet because he hit a rainstorm last night, and so we need your help taking it off of the flatbed, putting it in kind of really Muncie's newest community and youth center, and we need to kind of take them out and dry them out. So if you could help with that right after the service and just follow Brent over to the community center, that would be a huge blessing. So God is just doing some awesome things, from carpet tiles to being able to bless our community a little bit more with this free sale. And again, as I think about all the different things that God has been doing, watching him use us, this church, you, and I can go literally individually for many of you, I can say this is how God has been using you. I mean, there was even last week, one of the persons here in church, Sears is closing in Fort Wayne, and he's helping shut that down. He brought over a mop bucket. Well, I told him, hey, you saved us yesterday because the drain got clogged in the community center, and we didn't have a mop bucket. So God just, I mean, even before we knew what we needed, he's already providing it. So I got to tell you, I'm just so excited by what God is doing, and as he's rallying everyone around us. And that really brings me to today's message, and that is this: how do we find our joy in others? How do we find our joy in others? Now, as we think about finding joy in others, there's always a black sheep in the family, right? I'm just curious, how many of you, just by a show of hands, can think in your own family, yeah, we got a black sheep in our family. Yeah, we got a black sheep. Okay, keep your hands up. No, keep your hands up. Now, just go ahead and look around. Go ahead and look around. Well, notice that people who don't have a hand up, but just remember, there's always a black sheep in the family. I'm just saying there, there's a little love there. But we always have it, if you think about it, right? Every relationship, whether you're a parent or with your kids or with your spouse, everybody has their own little amount of crazy in a relationship. Can I get an amen? Oh, that was good. Okay, you missed that one, but it's true. Now, I'm just curious. So, Kim and I, we got married in 1996, May 1996, and yeah, there we are. Yeah, beautiful bride. That's about as good as I ever looked. Just got worse from there. And yeah, I think we look good, just like young pups. Wasn't that a nice picture? You know, when you first get married, you got to find out who the crazy person is. Like, who's crazy in your house? Like, one of you are going to be crazy. Well, we didn't know yet. We're just, newly married. I'm just curious, show of hands, how many of you would think I have the crazy at the house? Like, it's me, I'm the crazy in our house. Okay, almost everybody's hands up. Come on, man. What about Kim? You think Kim is the crazy one in the house? Maybe one and a half a hand? I don't even think there's you guys are just, you're scared. You're scared. Come on. Well, let me just break it down for you. So, here we are, newly married. And I'll never forget, I woke up one morning, And Kim said to me, she says, hey, how did you sleep last night? I'm like, oh yeah, I slept good. And I was like, wait a minute. As I think about it, my shoulder's kind of sore. I don't know. And as soon as I said that, she gave me a look that I had never seen before. Like, okay, you know something about this. Like, how would you know that my shoulder is sore? Well, she kind of looked and, she's like, well, I had a really bad dream last night, and I was really angry at you. Well, what did I do? She goes, I don't know. But I was really angry at you, and I didn't know what to do. And I was so angry. I was trying to figure this out, so I just bit you in my dream. Just hold on. And she goes, I woke up in the middle of the dream, and she goes, honestly, I don't know if I really did it or not. Well, let me tell you, the next day, I had marks to prove it. She hauled off with a bit of craziness. So there you go. There's the crazy in our family. It's all Kim. And I can say we have been married happily ever after. I do wear body armor every night and football pads to make sure there's no biting again. But anyhow, we all have our bit of crazy, right, in relationships. And you don't have to look any farther to find crazy when it comes to the Bible. I mean, it's just crazy all throughout when we look at some of the relationships. And one of the ones that I really want to kind of zero in on today as we look at finding joy in others, and especially if you've got black sheep in the family, or maybe you're that black sheep, how do we find that joy, or how do we restore that joy in others? And to do that, I want to look at the relationship between David and Jonathan and Saul. Now, just a little bit about these characters in our story today. Jonathan was the oldest in his family, and his dad was King Saul. Now, Jonathan, he was smart, he was cunning, he led armies. Matter of fact, he took 1,000 of his army and defeated the Philistines. I mean, no small feat. We also know that he was really skilled with the bow and kind of a sling, because you can read about this in a half-acre plot of land, which is probably maybe the size of this room. I don't know, maybe a little bit bigger. Him and his armor bearer took out 20. I mean, so it was 20 to 2, and he took them all out. That's what Jonathan did. And Jonathan was the oldest in his family, and he loved the Lord, and he was a warrior. He was a fighter. He was brave. And then there was David. It was David. Now David, he wasn't the oldest in his family. He was the youngest in his family, and he was a shepherd. He took care of sheep. But that was no small task, because we can read about David. David killed a lion. He killed a bear. Now, sometimes we gloss over that and we think, oh, kill a lion and a bear, that's not, but no. This is like hand-to-hand, almost like, this isn't you take your 30-06 or your shotgun and you sit in a blind at a tree stand. Like, no, he is literally killing a lion and a bear. So David was not a wimp. He was going to protect his sheep. He was going to do his job. Some of the things that we know about David is he was loyal, and he loved God. And he was also somebody that we know killed the giant. That's who David was. And he was the youngest son of Jesse. And he married Michal, which also he became kind of like a brother-in-law to Jonathan. So he had some of those tie-ins there. And as he began to grow in his leadership and stature, and even into the army, great respect was given to David. Saul, on the other hand, he was the king, and man, he had some pretty good runs as a king, but it didn't last for long, because there was a formidable event that happened that really bonded David and Jonathan together. And I guess you could say it bonded David and King Saul together, but not in a great way. And that was when David killed Goliath the giant, and they defeated the Philistines. And when he did this, when David did this, Jonathan was like, this is awesome, I need to get to know him. I want to be my friend. Jonathan was so moved that the Bible tells us that he gave Jonathan his robe, he gave him his bow, he gave him his armor. And I love this. Why would he do this? Why would he do this? It's kind of because, like, I think Jonathan's saying, listen, Like, you're not going into battle next time without any armor. Remember, the king had tried to give David the armor. It weighed 125 pounds. David couldn't even move in it. It was too heavy for him. So he chucked the armor away and he took his slingshot and he killed the giant. But this time, after he killed the giant, Jonathan said, listen, we're gonna be friends. We're gonna battle together. We're gonna come together. We're gonna be like BFFs. We're not gonna leave each other behind. That's what we're gonna do. That's what friendships do, and this is what's going to happen. And as that happened, as that event happened, this is really just where the relationship just became like super glue between Jonathan and David. Saul, on the other hand, King Saul, he began to hear the people. So what do the people say? The people are saying Saul has killed his thousands, but David has killed his tens of thousands. Well, Saul took David as a threat. And in that moment, he says, I am going to take out David, kill him, whenever I get the chance. So think about this. You've got David and Jonathan, like these BFFs, these friends that are just going to do life together and fight together. And then you've got Jonathan's dad, Saul, who's the king, who has a lot of resources, coming after David. And you want to talk about messy relationships and twists and turns and plots. I mean, this is it. This is it. So when we think about all of this, when Saul heard the people saying, David has killed his tens of thousands. So now Jonathan's caught in the middle, right? Have you ever been caught in the middle of a messy relationship? Well, Jonathan is. I mean, this is about as mess can get. Listen to what 1 Samuel 19 says, starting in verse 4. It says, the next morning, Jonathan spoke with his father about David, saying many good things about him. He's like, the king must not sin against his servant David, Jonathan said. He's like, Dad, he's never done any harm to you. He has always helped you in any way that he could. Jonathan then said, he says, have you forgotten about the time he risked his life to kill the Philistine giant and how the Lord brought a great victory to all Israel as a result? You were certainly happy about it then. Why should you murder an innocent man like David? I mean, can you just hear Jonathan pleading? Like, come on, Dad. Like, don't you remember this? He says there is no reason for it all. So the Bible tells us that Saul listened to Jonathan and made a vow. As surely as the Lord lives, David will not be killed. So afterward, Jonathan called David and told him what had happened. Then he brought David, his BFF, his friend, to Saul, and David served in the court as before. Continuing on, now listen to this. So it's like, okay, we think the relationship is mended. We think things are fine just as they once were before. I'm going to talk about that. Sometimes trying to repair a relationship like it was before. We got to be careful about that. And so continuing on, so everything is good. David's invited back. And really what brought David in really first to King Saul is David was a musician. He was playing the harp. And when Saul heard David play that harp, he was like, you can kind of be into my inner circle. So here we have David back into the inner circle. He's playing the harp, and this is what it says. It says, but one day, when Saul was sitting at home with spear in hand, as David played his harp, Saul hurled his spear at David. But David dodged out of the way, leaving the spear stuck in the wall. He fled and escaped into the night. Now, I don't know if David played a wrong note. Like, maybe it wasn't his song on his iTunes playlist. I don't know what happened here, but this is a messed up guy. This is a messed up relationship, isn't it? I mean, I don't know about the messed up relationships and the bit of crazy that you have in your family, but I personally have never had somebody throw a spear at me where I had to dodge it, and it was thrown at me so hard it stuck in the wall. This is David's life. So now we find David on the run. Saul is after him. So the question is this: what do we do when relationships are strained? What do we do maybe when our marriage isn't in the place it should be? What do we do when we've got that friend at school that just kind of drives us a little bit nuts? Or what do we do when that certain person walks into the room and you can just feel the elephant in the room, just right, it's there, and the blood pressure kind of, what do we do when we have those mess in relationships, when all that God really wants is for us to have joy in others? I don't know about you, but I'm like, I'm trying to find joy in this person. I ain't find it. It's not happening today, God. Like, what do we do? What can we learn from David? Well, here it is, 1 Samuel, and this is really where the main point of today's message is made today. 1 Samuel chapter 20, verse 42. Listen to this. And again, this is David on the run. I mean, Saul's after him. It says this, Jonathan said to David, "Go in peace, for we have sworn friendship with each other in the name of the Lord, saying, the Lord is witness between you and me, and between your descendants and my descendants forever." You see right here, do you see what happened? You see what happened? David and Jonathan made a vow in their friendship, and they said, we are going to take God and invite God right into the middle of our messy relationship. He's like, we have sworn this friendship with each other in the name of the Lord. Today, I want to encourage you, as you think about trying to find joy in others, I just need to ask you just a straight-up question. How are you at putting God right smack dab into the middle of your relationship? With your kids, with your spouse, with Uncle Eddie, with the black sheep. Like, where is that at? And my hunch is every one of us, even if the relationship is not strained, and I'm preaching myself right now, this is God's word, like, I'm thinking to myself, even preparing this message, how do I put God into the middle of the relationships with my kids so I can disciple them and raise them in the Lord? I got to tell you, there's days where I just have bad dad days. I just do. And it's like, wait a minute, I want to leave this legacy. I want to leave this for my kids. And so it's like, God, give me strength to do this. And I got to tell you, when you invite God into the middle of your relationships, you see this is the only way to find peace and healing and hope and joy. And so when you do that, when you invite God into your relationships, it does three things. It does three things. The first is this, it brings peace. It brings peace. Now this is easier said than done, right? I'll never forget growing up, a favorite friend of mine, we would be at each other's house a long time. And when his parents fought, like they wouldn't talk to each other. Like that's how they solved their conflict. And I asked my friend, I'm like, how long is this? I mean, literally, you're at the dinner table. They wouldn't even say pass the butter. They just didn't talk. And then he said, I'm like, I don't know, Mike. He goes, it can sometimes go on for days or even weeks. It just is. Like, how do we find joy in this? How do we bring that in? Let me just say this. One of the things that we often do with messy relationships is we try to hide it, right? We try to cover it up. We try to pretend that it doesn't exist. Speaking about hiding things, I'm guilty of this. I'm a dog person. We have Lily the dog, okay? And we also have some cats. Kim is the cat person. Now, Kim doesn't want really anything to do with Lily the dog. But one of the things that she will remind me of is she'll say, hey, Michael, has the yard been cleaned up of all the landmines? Right? Like, has that happened? And when we live in Indiana and it's raining and slushing and mess as it has been, you don't want to get out there and pick up that stuff. But guess what? God invented something. This is amazing. So when Kim kind of nags me to go pick that up, I'm like, man, why in the world do we have a dog? Like, oh, why do I have a dog? God did this. This is the amazing thing. He makes this stuff fall down from the sky. It's beautiful. They say that not one snowflake is alike. And if you look at it under a microscope, it looks amazing. And when this stuff falls down and it lands on the landmines, Kim looks out and doesn't see the landmines. She sees beautiful snow. I love it. And then when Lily goes out and does her thing again, guess what? More snow comes down. And I'm like, yes, this is great. And Kim, just don't tell her this. Maybe but she kind of forgets to remind me. And it's kind of nice, right? Like I don't have to go clean up the mess because it's hidden. God's hiding it for me. But the problem with snow is, right, we all know it melts. And usually, guess what my yard looks like when spring comes? Yeah, it's a mess. It's literally a pile of you-know-what. Think about our relationships. Think about the mess. Think about sometimes when we try to hide stuff. It's just like the landmines, right? It's a landmine, and it's getting ready to be tripped. And it doesn't take much. Some of us, you're stuffers, right? That's how you deal with conflict and problems. You just take that conflict problem, you stuff it in the bag, stuff it in the bag, stuff it, oh, everything's fine, everything's okay. And then you walk in the door and, you know, you're 5 minutes late for dinner or whatever it is, and boom, like the stuff just flies everywhere from the past year, and then some. It's like, what do I do to deserve this? Let me tell you, kids, you can't hide the mess from mom and dad, because they will find it. Husbands, wives, spouses, guess what? The moment you begin hiding stuff from one another, Satan's like, yes, I'm into this. This is good. But most importantly, we can't hide the mess from our Lord and Savior. And did you get this? God is just asking us. He's wanting us to invite Him in to the mess. And when we do that, number one, it brings peace. If you're taking notes, you can write this down. It brings peace. John chapter 14, verse 27 says this. Jesus said this. He goes, peace, what I leave with you. My peace, he says, I give you. And you can underline this. He says, I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled. And do not be afraid. I love this because when Jesus brings peace, he doesn't just bring a resolution or a treaty. He's not just bringing a flip a coin and you know, either you're going to win or you're going to win. Let nobody win. But when Jesus comes, what he does, he brings a resolution. And that's so far different. When he comes into the middle of the mess, he brings healing. And he helps set things right. And Jesus can make all things new. So the first thing, when we bring God in the middle of a mess of our relationships, it brings healing. The second thing, it brings, or the first thing it brings is peace. The second thing is healing. Now, all throughout the Bible, there's images that God uses that talks about God literally being like an ointment or a medication or kind of a balm or a salve. And he's like, the wounds that we have, it's going to heal them. And this is what we need in our messy relationships. It's like, God, give me your icy hot. Especially, as I try to play basketball as a 40-year-old. It doesn't happen too much. I'm the guy putting on the knee brace, the hip brace. And, I'm now that guy now. It's like, God, give me your healing ointment. I need it in my relationship. Listen to what Isaiah said in chapter 61, verse 1. And this was a prophecy talking about Jesus. And then Jesus would later requote these words. This is what it says. It says, the Spirit of the sovereign Lord is on me, because the Lord has anointed me to proclaim good news to who? The poor. Guess what? We're going to do that by getting our stuff and having that free sale. So again, be saving that. Bring that after the new year. Continuing on, he says, he has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted. Think about this. You've got a mess in your relationship. There's a broken heart there. God is saying, I want to bind that up. Continuing on, it says what? Bind up the brokenhearted to proclaim freedom for the captives and release from darkness for the prisoners. I mean, that's what we want, right? In our relationships, our broken hearts to be bound up. As I think about God's kind of ointment, how he wants to bind this up, if you're a parent, you know this is true. Like, and for my kids, anytime they would get a boo-boo, or even when I grew up and got a scratch on my knee or whatever, I fell off my bike, there's two things that I needed. Two things. I needed a Band-Aid and a hug and kiss from mom. Like, I got those two things, like the world's better, like get me back on my bike. I am good to rock and roll and go. Like, I'm ready to go. There's just power in the Band-Aid. I mean, some of you know, you put that Band-Aid on the crying kid, no more tears. It's like, okay, I'm good to go. There's power in the Band-Aid. And just like a little kid, right, this is what God does for us. This is how he brings healing. But the truth of the matter is, right, as we all look at our relationships, the messed up ones, many of you could say, I've got some deep scars here. Like there's a lot of pain and hurt. I'm there with you, personally. But when we look at those scars, remember God is wanting to do something new. My hope, my prayer for you is that when you look at that scar, and when you saw at one time that point of weakness, now you would see it as a point of strength and being able to give God glory for how He healed that wound. That's how we can look at those battle scars as He heals our relationships. So what does He do? He gives us peace, and He wants to bring healing in the middle of our messy relationships. And the third thing that it does as we think about scars and, again, growth of new tissue is that it brings growth. It brings growth. How many of you would agree with me that, by a show of hands, relationships should all develop and grow? Show of hands. Yeah, everybody's hands up. Exactly, right? Our relationships, no matter where they are with our kids, like my daughter is home from college. She just bought her first car this past week. She's doing this adulting thing, and it's like, oh my land, I have to buy tires, and I got to get things fixed. And she's like, I got to pay insurance, and I don't know if I like this part of the adulting, right? But one of the things that I'm having to do with my daughter is the relationship is changing. It's developing. It's growing. And even with my dad, I'll never forget my dad saying, he says, you know, after we got married, he says, Michael, my prayer, he goes, I said, Dad, I said, what are you praying for? How can we pray for you? He said, I'll tell you one of my prayers. He says, Michael, you want to know my prayer? I said, yeah. Dad, he says, our relationship has changed. He says, I want to be your best friend. I'll never forget my dad saying that. But he made my best friend. And my dad in that moment realized that relationships, he was telling me, they grow and they're supposed to develop, and we walk new roads together. Let me ask you, when's the last time you said to your spouse, maybe a friend at school or whatever, or maybe a college roommate, you say, you know, how can we put God into our relationship, right in the middle of maybe some mess, even better? I would so encourage you to beg, plead with you just to say, hey, how can we do that? Just one thing. How can we put God maybe a little bit more? Now, I'm not saying you got to get all spiritual and go read all the Bible together. I mean, although reading the Bible together is a good thing, but just start with something small and say, what could be that one thing that we could bring God in, just like Jonathan and David did? It's an interesting thing about relationships developing and growing. I mean, that wasn't new news to you. Everybody raised their hand, but the truth of the matter is we get sidetracked from this. We do, right? Maybe a strained relationship with your brother or sister, you know, because and it's like, man, if we could just get back to when we were kids. Or maybe, you know, you've been married for a long time and you think, man, if we could just get our marriage back to, you know, and during the honeymoon stages. And sometimes what we try to do is we try to begin going back and getting things to how they were, but it's impossible. Just like David, right, playing the harp, things were as they were before, and Saul, what does he do? He goes off launching a spear to kill David that impales itself into the wall. What God wants us to do is start with Him and create a new beginning. And again, those scars become points of strength. It's kind of like Humpty Dumpty, right? Had a few men, right? And Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. Like, you couldn't put them back together again. You see, this is where God is just saying, like David and Jonathan, are you going to invite me into this? So we can strengthen and put the super glue that I have into the relationship that you desperately need. This was powerfully, I'll close with this story. I was 16 years of age, and I was in Colorado Springs, and my grandpa said to me, hey, we're going to be leaving in a little bit. Can you back out Old Blue? Now, Old Blue pulled my grandparents' trailer, and as a 16-year-old that had just got my license, I was ready for the task. I mean, you know, when you're 16, just to pull the car, like, out of the driveway, right, it was awesome. So Grandpa gives me the keys to Old Blue. I mean, the steering wheel was, like, huge, and the shifters, like, you know. And I get in the Old Blue, and I check the mirrors, and I backed that thing up like a pro, and I went all good until I took out his fence as I cut Old Blue a little bit too sharp. And I got out and I looked at the fence on the ground and I was just like, oh no. And so here I go walking into my grandpa wearing the driving cone of Big Blue of shame. I'm like, Grandpa, I said, I got something to show you. I backed out Old Blue and I took out the fence. And Grandpa looked at me and says, okay, let's go look at it. And I thought he was going to be mad. I thought he was going to be ticked. I thought, he'd never let me drive again. I don't know what he would do. But we went out there and he looked at it and he says, he says, I've done the same thing. I've backed over that stupid fence many times over many decades. He says, you know what I think we need to do? He says, I think we just need to leave it broken right where it's at. We'll fix it, but never again will we back over that section again. And that day, Grandpa taught me a very important lesson. Sometimes we go back trying to fix the same old fence again and again and again. And Grandpa was saying, let's start with a new place in the fence. Let's repair where it's at. Let's do it so it never has to be broken. And as I think about that story, it's like when we begin to put God in our relationships into the mess of this, this is when we see truly the healing and the peace and the joy that comes from the relationships. And let me tell you, we can't go backwards. You already said it yourself. You raised your hand. Relationships have to develop and grow. And we have to allow God to do that. Remember, Jonathan said to David, go in peace. Why? Because we have sworn friendship to each other. In what? In whose name? The name of the Lord. The Lord is a witness between you and me and between, check this out, it's family. He says, between your descendants and my descendants. He says, this is how tight our friendship will be. Are you willing to do that this Christmas? Are you willing to invite God in to your sibling relationship with your brothers and sisters this year and have that conversation? Are you willing to do that with your friends, with your spouse? Maybe even people that you work with? You would have thought when a guy is coming to kill you, the moment he dies, you're like, yes, thank you, Lord. He's out of my life. I don't have to deal with him anymore. When you really read David's story and just the vengeance that Saul had and the bitterness and the anger, you would have thought that the day when Saul died, David would have thrown a party. It wasn't that type of party. Let me read to you 2 Samuel, chapter 1, verse 11 and 12. It says, David and men. So, David just had heard that Saul died. King Saul died. And Jonathan in a battle. So David had just heard this. He just got his reports from his lieutenants and said, hey, David, we want to let you know that Saul is dead and Jonathan is dead. And this is what the Bible said. David and his men tore their clothes in sorrow when they heard the news. They mourned and wept and fasted all day just for Saul. Did it say that? No, it didn't. It said they mourned, wept, and fasted all day for Saul and his son Jonathan, and for the Lord's army, and for the nation of Israel, because they had died by the sword that day. Even when relationships get as messy as they possibly can, God can bring us to a point where we weep for the person that brings the mess, because we love them and we miss them when we put God in the middle of our messy relationships. And so when we bring this, when we bring God into it, again, it does three things. It brings peace, it brings healing, and it brings growth. And that, my friends, is how we have joy in others. Why don't you stand with me and pray? Heavenly Father, I thank you so much for the lesson that we learned today by David and Jonathan and Saul, and just the mess of a relationship that they were in. And God, the truth of the matter is if we were all probably honest, we would probably say, yeah, there's some mess and some relationships that I have. My marriage could be a little bit stronger. My relationships could be a little bit deeper. My friendships could be closer of a bond, the bond that Jonathan and David had to say, hey, we're going to make an oath. And that friendship would be so deep that we would cling to one another for decades to come, for generations to come. Lord, the truth of the matter is as hard as we often try to do relationships without you, we can't. And if we're going to find joy, we have to bring you into it. And so, Lord, right now, as we're praying, and like we do every week, I just want to invite people up to the front. Maybe they're there with the family today, and they're like thinking, boy, we're getting ready to celebrate Christmas, and all the presents, all that stuff is good, but God, help us not to miss the true reason for this season. God, help us to put Christ in Christmas. God, help us to do this right now. Help us not to take a moment for granted with you and not put you into the middle of our relationships. And God, I don't know, maybe there's a family, maybe there's a spouse, maybe there's a friend. We just need to go to the front and spend this time in prayer, hand in hand, just say, you know what, we got this, God. We ask that you just come into the middle of our relationships. Or I don't know, Lord, maybe there's, when you think about relationships, this past week has been an amazing week. Maybe kids, you're thankful for your mom and dad, and you just haven't shared that. And maybe right now is a moment where you just want to look at mom and dad, and maybe just squeeze their hand and say, Mom, Dad, I love you. I thank you. I thank you that God is in the context of our family, and I want to grow. Can we grow our kids even more as parents? Can we grow as siblings? God, help us, bless us in all the relationships that we have. And Lord, most of all, bless us with the relationships of those that aren't here. God, there's many people here that are not here today, that are looking for hope, that are trying to find joy, but they can't, Lord. And God, I pray that we can be a light into our families, into our communities, as we invite you into those relationships. So, Lord, as we continue this time of prayer, we're just saying, God, we need you. We need you. Let's continue this time of prayer and a time of worship.